Hello everyone, welcome to Enviro Pioneers. In one of our previous videos, we have discussed about the spectral signature. This is a spectral signature of vegetation, means a spectral reflectance curve for the healthy vegetation. If you notice in this diagram, not all wavelengths are equally reflected. There is some amount of reflection in the visible range, then high amount of reflection in NIR, then again we are having two reflection peak in the middle infrared portion. So there must be some reason behind the difference in the reflectance of different wavelength from the vegetation. So in this video, we are going to understand about the different factors which are responsible for this variation, means variation in the reflectance pattern across the different wavelength range, and which give the unique spectral reflectance characteristics to the vegetation. The vegetation, it receives the electromagnetic radiation either in the form of the direct or diffuse radiation. So when the light is incident on the leaf, some portion is reflected, some portion is absorbed, and some portion is transmitted through the leaf. When we talk about the visible portion, only green color is reflected from the vegetation, giving the green color to the plants or what we see in our surrounding. But apart from the green, we also have the reflection in the NIR range, which is very strongly reflected. So if we talk about spectral incident radiant flux, means the amount of energy which is incident on the leaf for a particular wavelength, that can be defined as the spectral incident radiant flux. So for that wavelength, this energy, it should be equal to the energy that is reflected plus the energy which is absorbed and plus the energy which is transmitted, because whatever is incident, either it will be reflected or it will be absorbed or it will be transmitted. So if we divide each unit in this equation by the incident radiant flux, then we get a spectral hemispherical value for each of them. So here we have the energy which is incident for a particular wavelength. It is equal to spectral hemispherical reflectance plus spectral hemispherical absorbance plus spectral hemispherical transmittance. But in case of remote sensing, this part is very important because this spectral hemispherical reflectance is the amount of this energy which will be reaching to the sensor after the interaction from the vegetation. So in vegetation, the dominant factors which control the leaf reflectance are the leaf pigment, the cell structure, and the water content. So here if you notice, each of the factors are responsible for interaction in different wavelength range. So leaf pigments are responsible for reflection in the visible range. Cell structure and the internal scattering is responsible for interaction in the NIR range, and the leaf water content is responsible for reflection or interaction in the shortwave infrared range. So here if we see in this reflectance pattern, the blue and the red portion is getting absorbed and some amount of the green energy is reflected. But after red, we are having a sudden increase in the reflectance, and overall reflection is also very high in comparison to the visible and the shortwave infrared. If we see in the shortwave infrared, overall reflection is less, but within this range, again we are having the two reflection peak. So in the vegetation, leaf pigments, internal scattering, and the leaf water content are the dominating factors which control the leaf reflectance in the visible, NIR, and the shortwave infrared. So now we will discuss each of the interaction in detail one by one. So let us start with this part, the interaction of the visible light with the pigments in the palisade mesophyll cells. So before understanding about this interaction, let us see the cross section of a leaf. This image, it represents a cross section of a leaf where this part is the upper epidermis, which is covered with a cuticle. So cuticle, it allows the diffusion of the electromagnetic radiation into the leaf, And below the upper epidermis, we have the mesophyll cells, also known as the parenchyma. Palisade mesophylls or palisade parenchyma are the tubular structures which are present towards the side which is receiving the solar radiation. So if it is a horizontal leaf, the palisade parenchyma, it is generally present at the upper side of the leaf. But if the leaf is having the vertical orientation, this palisade parenchyma may be present on either side of the leaf. But generally, these palisade parenchyma are present on the side which is receiving the more amount of the solar radiation. So here we have this palisade parenchyma, and these are the cells which have the chloroplast and the chlorophyll pigments. Then below this palisade parenchyma, we are having the spongy mesophyll or spongy parenchyma, which is composed of the loosely arranged cells and the intercellular air spaces. And then beneath this, we are having the lower epidermis, which contains the stomata. So this is the general representation of a leaf, and palisade parenchyma is the place where we have the interaction of the visible light, and the spongy mesophyll or spongy parenchyma is the place where we are having the interaction of the near infrared and the mid infrared or the shortwave infrared portion. Now we are going to focus on the palisade parenchyma, where we have the chloroplast, and this is the major part of the leaf where the photosynthesis occurs. And here we have all the pigments present within the palisade mesophyll cells. So in vegetation, the dominating pigment is chlorophyll, and this chlorophyll is present in two forms, chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. Here in this diagram, we are having the absorption spectra of the chlorophyll and the carotenoid. Chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B both absorb the blue and the red light. Chlorophyll A has the absorption peak at the 0.43 and 0.66 micrometer, while chlorophyll B is having the absorption peak at 0.45 and 0.65. So this portion is completely absorbed, and in the blue wavelength range, here also we can see that this portion is getting absorbed. The yellow line is the absorption spectra of the carotenoids. So for this we can see here we are having the absorption mainly in the blue portion. So carotenoids are responsible for reflection in the green and the red wavelength range. Here in this diagram we can see three conditions. One is the healthy leaf, second is the stressed leaf, and third is the dead leaf. So in healthy leaf we are having the high reflectance in the green and very high reflectance in the NIR. But when the plant is under stress, we can see that there is decrease in the reflection of the NIR range. And when we are having the senescence of leaf, means when the leaf is dead, in that case we can see that all the wavelength range are equally reflected from the leaf. So this change in the reflection, this is mainly because of the change in the behavior of the pigments, because when chlorophyll is present, the behavior of other pigments are masked. But during senescence, as the concentration of the chlorophyll decreases, the behavior of other pigments come into notice. So here we have the yellow carotenes and the yellow xanthophyll pigments. They also have the strong absorption in the blue region. Then we have the beta carotene. This is also having the strong absorption at the 0.45 micrometer. It means it will be absorbing the blue portion and reflecting the green and the red wavelength range. Then we have the phycoerythrin pigment, which is having the absorption band at 0.55 micrometer, which falls in the green range. So some amount of the blue and major amount of the red wavelength is reflected. So here we can see this example in the red algae. So this color of the red algae is mainly due to the presence of the phycoerythrin. Then another pigment is the phycocyanin, which is having the absorption band at 0.62 micrometer, which falls in the red wavelength range. So mainly blue and the green portion is reflected. So the combined reflectance of the blue and the green color gives cyan color to the vegetation. This is generally present in the blue-green algae. So on the left hand side we have an image which shows change in color with the age of the leaf. So here we can see as the leaf it grows, the dominating color is green, but during its senescence the color it changes into the yellow and then eventually towards the reddish color. So this mainly happens because during its growth the dominating pigments are the chlorophyll A and the chlorophyll B, which are having the strong absorption in the blue and the red wavelength, giving the strong reflectance in the green color. But as the senescence starts, the chlorophyll A and the chlorophyll B concentration it decreases, and the color which we see, that is mainly because of the carotenoids which is having the strong absorption in the blue wavelength, giving the mixed reflectance pattern in the green and the red wavelength range. So the visible portion, the 400 to 700 nanometer, is also referred as the photosynthetically active region for the vegetation, because this is the portion of the electromagnetic spectrum which is absorbed by the pigment of the vegetations. And by detecting the amount of reflection in each of the wavelength range, the health of the vegetation can be monitored. Next is the interaction of the near-infrared electromagnetic radiation within the spongy mesophyll cells. So as we saw in the diagram that in the healthy green leaf, the reflectance in the NIR it increased dramatically in the region of 700 to 1200 nanometer, means it is much higher in comparison to the visible and the shortwave infrared. So plants have adapted themselves not to absorb this NIR, because if this portion will be absorbed, the overall heat content of the plant will increase, which will denature the proteins present in the cells. Spongy mesophyll parenchyma or spongy mesophyll layer, which is composed of the cells and the intercellular air spaces, this control the amount of near infrared that is reflected from the vegetation. So normally the healthy green vegetation, it is characterized by high reflectance, that is 40 to 60%, then high transmittance, that is also 40 to 60%, and very less absorbance. So this is only 5 to 10%. So this particular high reflectance, it is mainly because of the internal scattering at the cell wall and the air interfaces within the leaf. The strong reflection in NIR wavelength range, it mainly comes from the multiple scattering in the plant canopy, and it is referred as the leaf additive reflectance. Means the greater the number of leaf in the healthy mature canopy, there will be greater infrared reflectance. We are not talking about the visible and the short wave here. We are only taking the near infrared electromagnetic range into consideration. So in this image, two leaves have been taken into account to understand the concept, and we are assuming that there is no absorption of NIR, only reflection and the transmission. So of the incident radiant flux on the leaf 1, 50% is reflected and the 50% is transmitted. First part clear? And then this transmitted radiant flux, when it is incident on the second leaf, again 50% of it will be reflected and 50% will be transmitted. Now ये जो reflected energy है या reflected part है, now it is incident on the lower part of the leaf. Now again the same phenomena will occur, यानी कि यहाँ से भी इसका 50% जो है वो रिफ्लेक्ट हो रहा है एंड देन 50% इसका ट्रांसमिट हो रहा है, यानी ये आपका यहाँ पे हुआ 50 एंड देन इसका आधा हो गया 25% एंड देन means 25% reflection and 25% transmission, and this and इसका अगेन हाफ अगर हम करें तो 12.5% रिफ्लेक्शन and 12.5% transmission. So considering only this much part, if we are having the additive reflection, that will be 50% plus 12.5%. So overall additive reflectance from the leaf 1 and the leaf 2 is 62.5%. Suppose अगर हम ये कंसीडर करें कि यहाँ पे लीफ 2 है ही नहीं, तो उस केस में क्या होगा कि ये जो एनर्जी है इसका 50% रिफ्लेक्ट हुआ एंड 50% जो ट्रांसमिट हुआ, नाउ इट विल फॉल ऑन दिस any other object which is present on the ground, because if we are not having any other leaves, in that case ये जो एनर्जी ट्रांसमिट हो रही है वो किसी और ऑब्जेक्ट के थ्रू एब्जॉर्ब हो जाएगी. सो ओवरऑल रिफ्लेक्टेंस कितना होगा तब उस केस में? दैट विल बी ओनली 50%. So if we talk about the NIR, more the number of leaves will be having the stronger reflectance in the NIR, which is mainly because of the additive reflectance from the leaves. So healthy is the vegetation will be having the strong reflectance in the NIR range. If there is any stress or if there is change in the canopy cover, will be having the decrease in the amount of reflectance in the NIR range. As we noticed in the reflectance pattern that after red we are having the sudden increase in the reflection in the NIR range. So this peak, this is referred as the red edge or the red edge spectral region. So this sudden increase after red in the NIR region, that is referred as the red edge. Now related to this, we have the blue shift of the red edge. Means when there is any type of stress to the plants, the reflectance pattern, it changes. So here we have two lines. The green one is showing the healthy plant reflection and the red one is showing the stressed plant reflection. We can see that the position of the red edge is shifted slightly towards the left and the overall reflection in NIR also decreases. So this shift of the red edge towards the left or towards the shorter wavelength is referred as the blue shift of the red edge. Here also we can see two lines. The one which is darker, it is showing the reflection of the normal vegetation, while the one which is lighter in color, it is showing the plant which is undergoing any stress. So this shift of the red and infrared transition curve or the red edge towards the shorter wavelength is referred as the blue shift of the red edge. This can be very helpful in understanding the behavior of the plant in any stress condition. This image has been taken from a research paper where the authors exposed the plants to different concentration of the cadmium to understand the stress condition. So here we have the low, medium and the high concentration. Red line is representing the reflectance pattern of the plants which are exposed to the high concentration of the cadmium, and the blue line, it is showing the plant which were exposed to the low concentration. So here in this part and here, if we see that the plant which were exposed to the high concentration, overall reflectance in the NIR, it decreased, and also we can see here that this blue one is the red edge when the plant were exposed to the low concentration, but in the high concentration this shifted towards the left. And last is the interaction of mid-infrared with the water in the spongy mesophils. So normally atmosphere में जो water vapors present हैं उनका absorption band जो है that is at 0.97, 1.19, 1.45, 1.94 and 2.7 micrometer, जिसमें सबसे ज़्यादा strong absorption जो होता है that is at 2.7 micrometer. Many of these studies, they have reported a very strong correlation between the reflectance in the MIR from 1.3 to 2.5 and the amount of water which is present in the leaves of a plant canopy. In mid-infrared wavelength, जो vegetation reflectance peak है that is at 1.6 and 2.2 micrometer, and it is in between the major atmospheric water absorption bands. So if the plant is in turgid condition or if it is having the less amount of water, accordingly the reflectance, it varies, because this water, it is the good absorber of mid-infrared. So the greater the turgidity of the leaves, the lower will be the mid-infrared reflectance. This can be more clear from the reflective response of a single magnolia leaf to decreased relative water content, and this image has been taken from the Jensen 2000. Here we have the different reflectance spectra of a leaf with varying water content. So this portion is the visible. Here we have the NIR and this portion is the mid-infrared. So here we are having the two peaks, one near to 1.6 and second is at the 2.2. So more the amount of water will be having the less reflection in the mid-infrared region. Okay, but if the water content decreases, in that case यहाँ पे जो reflection है that will increase. Now we can see here different lines denoting different water content. So if the water content is 75, we can see that there is increase in the reflectance of the MIR, and then this is the case when we are having the 25% water content, and this line is showing the 5% water content. So there is very significant change in the reflectance pattern in the mid-infrared portion, because if the plant is turgid and is having the sufficient water content, there will be less reflection in the mid-infrared. But if there is not sufficient amount of water or if it is in wilting condition, then because of the less amount of water present in the cells, will be having the high reflectance in the mid-infrared portion. So this can be very helpful in the regional assessment of the crop water condition, for irrigation scheduling or for the stress assessment, and for the yield modeling for the agriculture, rangeland and the forestry management. This video was about the dominating factors which regulate the amount of reflection in different wavelength range, and this concept can be helpful in the remote sensing of vegetation, either in the forest management or agriculture or urban management. This concept or this understanding is very important before we use the satellite imagery for vegetation analysis, because each bands will give us information about different parameters. Suppose if we are selecting the bands in the visible range, that will give us information about the pigments of the vegetation, and if we are selecting the NIR band, then that will help us in understanding the canopy structure. And then if we are selecting the shortwave infrared, then it will give us information about the plant water content. So depending upon the type of study which we are doing and what information is needed, accordingly the band selection is to be done. Thank you all for your continuous support. We will meet soon in the next video. Thank you.